Greetings hobbyists, this is Artisans of Wool. And in this video we're having a look at how we can combine Blender 5's new array modifier with drivers. So in a recent video we made a bookshelf with Blender 5's new array modifier, and the new array modifier is particularly powerful just because it has so many different options available to it in the way that you can make it work off of a line, a circle, a curve or a transformation. Now what we didn't cover in that video is how we can combine this with drivers. And drivers are effectively a way of telling Blender to use one object to do something with another object. So what we're going to do is have a look at that and how powerful this is to create a bookshelf that will self-generate as you change the size of it. So we're going to start by deleting the default cube and Shift and A, mesh and bring in a cube. And importantly, we need to turn the size of this down to 1. Now this is very important in terms of drivers and I'll explain why. We want to use the size of this object to work the drivers. We basically need to be able to right click to copy this as a driver, but we can't select dimensions. However, we can select the scale to be able to copy this as a new driver. So what we need is that the scale to equal 1 when the dimension equals 1. So hence the cube that's going to be 1, because now if I put this size up on, let's say, the y-axis to 2, you can see it's going to change the scale to 2 as well, and that's very, very important. Right, so what we're going to do is make the basis of our shelf, and we're going to make the side panel first. So what we want is a width of, let's say, 15, so we'll go to 15 there. We've got our width of this being 2, and then we've got our Z height being whatever we want this to be. Let's put this as, I don't know, 100, something like that. Now, we've instantly got a problem that we don't like, and this is going to cause us a problem with our driver in that this is moving upwards and downwards, and we don't want this. We want this to move just purely upwards. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go into edge mode. So let's just tab 2 to go into edge mode, select that edge. I'm going to shift an S and I'm going to bring my cursor to the selected, so that edge there. Then we're going to tab out of edit mode, go to object, set origin, and origin to 3D cursor. So now it's on this edge, which means that when we change our height, so we'll change this here to, I don't know, whatever, let's call this 60 actually, it just goes upwards from that corner. And this is going to be very important for our manipulation of this. Right, let's make our other shelf. So Shift A, mesh, bring in another cube. Once again, we're starting with 1. Let's just G and Y this across a bit. We'll deal with that in a second. Once again, we're going to want a width of 2 to make it look like it's all the same wood that's made these shelves. So that's going to be in the Z axis this time, 2. We want our same width, so our X is going to be 15. And let's just get this in place. So we're going to use snap base for this. So make sure that your snapping is set to at least have edge or vertex on it. Now if you want to do multiple like I've got, just click and hold down shift so it works off of multiples, and then we're just going to G to start moving, B to activate snap base and click that corner and then come to there. And then once again we need to do the same trick of having our origin on this line, because we're going to need to control our width of our shelves going in this direction, and again we want that from this corner. Now realistically you could actually do it from anywhere, you could do it this whole face, but I always like picking corners because it gives us control over 2 axes if we need them. So once again, tab, edge mode, shift and S, cursor to selected, and then tab out of edit mode, object, set origin, and origin to 3D cursor. And then come out of isolation and we can change our width to be whatever we want. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we want is to change the number of shelves. So we're going to have a multitude of shelves that is going to depend on this length. Now there's multiple ways of doing this, but what I'm going to do is come in here, add modifier and array, and we're going to just drag this out, and we're going to keep the line, but we're going to focus on the end point. We want this to be translating up, so not the X, so we're going to put that to 0. And we want our Z to control our endpoint. So this is what we're going to need to put our driver for. So let's have a look at how we're going to do this. And once we do this, it's just manipulating it in the right way and making sure we use the best array for what we want to do for each of our things. So let's click on this object. We're going to come to our scale, which is the Z, right click, and then I'm going to copy as a new driver. We're going to come in here, and for our translation, I'm going to right click here and I'm going to paste as a driver. So now our endpoint is 60. But our scale of our own object, this object here, is 2. So this now means that our 60 is being doubled, which is a problem. So what we're going to do is edit this. So let's right click and we can click edit driver, and we don't want an average value, we want a scripted expression. This basically means do maths. So at the moment we're using scale, we want to just divide this by 2, so divided by 2, and now this is working. Except we've got a problem. We've got this little bit of extra height, and unsurprisingly this height is, well, 2, and it's 2 because that's the thickness of our object. Okay, so this has a scale on the Z, if we just bring this array away, of 2 in height. So what we need to actually do is take 2 off of this. Now, what's really cool is once I've done this once and right-clicked, go to edit driver and change this to a scripted expression, now we can do all of the scripting just by clicking on here. So what I'm going to do is put a bracket in. So we're going to use standard secondary school maths, and we want to -2. Except this hasn't worked because our scale on the Z is already 2. So actually we only need to -1. Okay, so there is some stuff to do with paying attention to the scale. Basically, we need to know that the Z-axis is doubling whatever we type in. So there we go. Now we could have made this a little bit easier by not having everything scaled as 1 to begin with, but then this almost gets more complicated in other ways. So we'll stick with this. But what this means now is I can change my Z and everything goes with it. And we get our really high shelves. But we don't want shelves that go ridiculously large. We want shelves where the count goes up if we hit a certain threshold. So what we'll do is we'll come back here. Once again, we want to use the Z. So we'll right click, copy as new driver, come back here, and we're going to go to count and we're going to paste this as a driver. So we're now getting 94, right click, edit driver. Once again, we want a scripted expression, and I'm going to divide this by 20. So there we go. So now, if I just drag this height back down to, let's say, 60, you'll notice as we reach that threshold each time of going below a certain amount, so multiples of 20, we lose a shelf. So there we go. We've got 3 shelves, get to 80, and we get 4 shelves, and so on. So this works really, really nicely. And hopefully you can see the power in this. We haven't had to do anything like going into geometry nodes or doing anything funky with this. It's just using some pretty basic maths and the drivers that are now here. Right, at this point, we need, well, this side. So we need something over here. So what we could normally do is just mirror this to the other side of this object. But the problem is the mirror works off of the origin, and the origin's right in this corner. So we can't do this. So we're going to array this as well. So let's add modifier, array. We want a line. We only want this to be 2. We're never going to change that. And we don't want this in the x-axis, but I'm going to go for offset. So 0, and then what we'll do is just check this. So this would be the y. Yep, that's what we want. And we want this to be whatever our width is here. So our distance on the y-axis. So let's come to y, right click, copy as new driver, come to our array, and on our translation here, we're going to right click and paste driver. Now, once again, this is doubling because we've got on our y-axis a scale of 2. It'd be really cool if you could just right click and apply only one scale. That would be awesome, but we can't. So once again, we're going to have to right click, edit the driver, turn it to a scripted value, and we're just going to divide this by 2. Now we're getting a slight overlap. So if you notice here, because once again, we've got this thickness of 2, so we're going to come to here, come to our scripted expression, put it in brackets, and we are going to want to add a distance of 2, but we've already got a scale of 2, so we just need to plus 1, because we're adding 1 more of itself, effectively. Now, if we come here, whatever I decide to change my y-axis, our shelf goes with it. So now we can control this with the y-axis here, and then we can control the height with the z-axis here. Again, I hope you're seeing how powerful this is and how many potential projects this could be usable for or different situations. You're effectively making something that is pretty CAD-like, just using the basic native functions of Blender. Right, let's make a book. So, Shift-A, Mesh, I'm going to bring in a cube. Now, we're not going to worry too much about the scale of these because we're not using this to manipulate anything else off of this. We're just allowing this to be manipulated. So I'm going to set this to a scale of 5, just because that's the thickness I want my book. We're going to do the same trick that we want it in the corner. But in this instance, we're going to want to control the height of our books, so we can have some variation on our books. We also want to control how wide our book is that way to make everything look a little bit different. So we actually need to put this right in this corner, the back corner. So let's just tab into edit mode and 1 to go into vertex mode. Click here, Shift and S, cursor to selective, and then come out, object, set origin, and origin to 3D cursor. So we're good to go. Now we want to move this to our back corner. So same trick, GB, grab that there, move it to that corner, and now we can start manipulating our book. And we want to start off with our book being the maximum size it can be. So we're going to put our x-axis all the way up to, let's say, a bit less. So let's go to 14. So it's not all the way right to the edge. We're going to go on the z-axis. We want our highest point to be, let's say, there. We'll call this 20. No, actually a bit less than 20 because we've set our bookshelf to go down to that. So we'll call this actually 19, so there's a slight gap. So when we come here, and let's say reduce our height down to 60, we've got a bit of a gap. In fact, we could probably go a bit bigger than that. Let's go to, I don't know, we'll call that there. Okay, something around this. But anyway, we're just going to eyeball it to something we're happy with. We're going to have to control an A and apply the scale, and that's only so we can do some beveling, because I want to bevel this book to make it a little rounder. So let's tab to select and shift select, control and B, and we'll round this out to make our book. Let's put this up to somewhere in the region of 16. Oh, I hadn't spotted that. Look where they now put this. It's really nice in the middle and very much easier to see than in the top left-hand corner. That's great. Really like that change. Very nice and clear. So we've got that there, and then we're going to make our pages. So click, shift click. Let's just X-ray and shift click there as well. Let's I to inset. If your inset looks like this, it's because you've hit it twice. So just I once. I'm going to go somewhere there, and then Alt and E and extrude faces along normals, and we'll just put that in there to be our pages. Possibly a little overkill on the book detail because we're probably going to see this from here, but that's fine. Let's make sure we've got as much detail as we want. So next, we need to array this along here. Now this is going to be the very important bit. You would think we want to come here and add in an array, and we're just going to use one of the line arrays. We're not going to want it in the X direction, we're going to want it in the Y direction, and we're going to keep going along here, and we're just going to up the count. Now that would work great, except for if we do that, when we then array this upwards, because we're going to array this again, all the books will look the same. We'll do this once, and then you'll see why this isn't great. So let's just come here. We're going to have the offset. We want to do relative because we want it the same thickness. So we'll put this as 1 if you want them exactly touching. So that should be fine there. Now this is going to look better once we start randomizing this. We're going to use the randomize value, and we're going to tell it to randomize our height. And this is going to work because we've got our origin just here, right at this bottom corner. So let's randomize our height. We want our scales to not be uniform, so we're going to do axes, and then I can have my height be randomized as much as I want. Let's go to 0.4. That will give us some good variation on our book height. We're going to do exactly the same thing in the x-axis. So let's go to 0.4 again and see how that looks. And yeah, that looks great. And you'll notice now these being right touching isn't going to be a massive problem here. Then we could just up our count and have it as much as we need, bear in mind that we can use a driver again. The problem here is if we choose to do another array, so Shift A and array, and I do this instead now, let's do offset, let's do 0, and in the z-axis, so we've got our array here. Oh, we only want 2 just for this demonstration. So let's move this up. Hopefully you'll notice the problem. The books are the same on every row, which is just going to look like one of those things that you saw in older computer games where it's all predictable and it's just a repetition. We really don't want that. We want this to look like a proper set of books. So what we're going to do, actually I'll just delete that, is come to this array, and we don't want to use a line. Instead, we're going to use a curve. And there is a very, very important reason for this. Now, what we need to do is remember that these are our books. So actually, let's just come up here and double click on this and name this books, because at the moment we can't see it. I can always bring it back to line so I can see it again, but we'll just go to curve and keep this so it's effectively invisible. And what we're going to do is we are going to create the line that we're going to work this off of. And we want a line that goes from this back corner. So let's just stick with a book selected, because that's where the origin is. We can see it in blue. Shift and S, and we'll move our cursor to selected. And then we're going to Shift A, curve, and we're going to bring it in a path. Now, this path is going to be in the wrong direction. Let's just have a look at it. So let's just go into edit mode. And what we're going to do is start by getting rid of these two bits. So X, and delete the vertices. We also don't want this vertex. So X, delete that vertex. And this, we want, well, somewhere over here. So actually, let's just select this one, X, and delete that vertex. We'll select this one and just E it out. And we're going to hit Y to have that on the Y-axis. Now, once again, we've got the power to control this. So you can see we can make this longer on the Y-axis. And we want this to have a length of, well, there, basically, all the way up to this end. The same as the size of this. So for this shelf, we'll just come to our Y scale, right click, copy as new driver, come to our path. Oh, what we're going to do, sorry, let's make this so, remember, we can't do this for the dimensions, so we're going to have to do this on the scale. So I'm going to bring this down to 1. There we go. Control and A and apply the scale. And now I can right click on scale and then paste as a driver. And then this is now 64.7, exactly the same as this. So our curve is now going to remain the same length as this. Now we're going to have a slight problem with this. We'll come back to it, but let's go back to our books. We're going to keep this as our curve. We're going to click here and we're going to go to our NURBS path. And we've got all of our books. And then we'll notice all our books are in the wrong orientation. Well, that's because we've got our rotation aligned to the curve, which for many things is useful, but for this is not. So let's just turn that off. There we go. And then you're going to notice our issue. Look, we've got a book that's gone too far. Right, why is that going to be? Well, it's because our books each time start in the bottom left-hand corner, and our curve ends at this point here. So what we need to do is actually come to our curve, and we need to make our scale 5 less than whatever it is, because our books are 5 wide. Again, we can see that if we come here, they're 5 wide on the Y. So again, it's just keeping track of all of your sizes. So let's come here, right click, edit driver, change that again to a scripted expression, and we've got scale, and then we're just going to -5. And because everything was set as 1, we're not going to have to do any more maths. So here we go. This seems to be working. And what I can do now is change this on the Y, and then you'll notice that as we do this on the Y, it stretches out, but oh, we're not getting enough books. Our books are just getting stretched. But there is a way to solve this easily, and that's because we can change it from count to distance. So let's do our distance as 5, and oh look, our books are sorted now. And if we change this, as soon as we go to 5, we get a new book. There we go. And then at this point, we need to array our books upwards. But importantly, we're not going to array the books. We're going to array the NURBS path. You'll see why in a second. This is quite important. So let's add a modifier and array. And again, just to reiterate this, we're doing this to the NURBS path. And we're going to want to offset this up. We're not going to use an endpoint. Let's bring the count down to 2 for now. So our offset is going to be 0, and then it's going to be Z up somewhere here. Now, straight away, you'll notice that these books don't look the same. They're suddenly different. Well, why is that? Well, the reason for this, if we come to the books, is where you've got a curve array, you have this option for per curve. If I turn this off, this doesn't work. Well, it sort of works, but it's not as nice. If we do per curve, then it sets up each curve to be individually, almost like its own entity, which means that as it randomizes each of the books, it does it along each curve, so we don't get the repetition, which is nice. You also notice for randomize, have this option for excludes first. We probably want to take that off so that our first book can be randomized as well. So this is now going to work, but we need to set up this so it works, that we've got this as a driver. Otherwise, it's not going to work automatically. So what we want to do effectively is use this length again. So let's come to our Z scale, right click, copy as new driver, come to our curve, and then we're going to do our offset, and we're going to right click and then paste driver, and it's going to go too far. So we need this to be less. And this is where this is going to be a bit complicated. So let's go into it. So we need our Z, right click, edit drivers, and then turn it into a scripted expression to be our scale divided by, let's just do 2 for now. And we've got that down here. Now this is starting to look okay, but we've got a slight gap. But if we come here and we change our Z, this is sort of working. Maybe not. Okay, so nearly working, but what we need to do is, as this changes the count, we need to change how this is being divided. So we don't want this to be divided by 2. We need to divide it by however many shelves we've got. So I'm going to come to the count here, right click, and we're going to copy this as a data path. We're going to come back to our NURBS curve. So we're going to right click and we're going to edit our driver. Now this is quite cool because I can now show you having more than one variable. We've got our scale being used, but we need to use another one. And over here we get this nice easy to use set of buttons where I can just paste my driver variable. So click there, and there we go. We've got it here. It's called socket 5. Maybe not a great name. Let's call this shelf count. And then instead of dividing by 2, I can divide by the shelf count. Now the problem with that is our shelf count is 3. We only want to divide it by 2. So what we're going to do is shelf count in brackets -1. And now this is just about working, though we've got a gap to work off of. We'll deal with that in a second. But what that means is now if I start changing my Z height, so here, every time I add a new thing, my shelves go to the correct place. Although it does cause a problem if we only have one. We'll just bear that in mind. So what we need to do for our NURBS path is also keep upping our count each time. So our count is going to do the same thing as our counts for our line. So I'm actually just going to right click and copy this as a data path. Notice this has already got a driver acting on it. That's why it's purple, but we can use it again. So let's come to our NURB path, count, right click, and paste this as a new driver. But we don't want 3, so right click, edit driver, scripted expression, and we're going to have this -1. So there we go. Now, as I said, we do need to sort out our height. It's got a bit of a gap here. So let's just click here. And after this all is done, so bracket that, we need to -1. There we go. Yeah, so that's perfect. So there we go. So this is now working. So at this point, we can come here. We can change our width and our books extend out with this. There we go. We can change this and we can up our height. So let's change this on the Z. There we go. So our bookshelf can get higher. Ooh, slight issue here. So there's something wrong with our NURBS path. Let's have a look at this. It's going to be to do with this distance. I think we probably want to actually -1 from our scale. Instead, let's get rid of that. And let's see how that works. Nearly. Let's play around with this and see what's going on. Because I think we have that value of 2 coming in here. So let's just right click, edit driver. And let's just change that to -2. There we go. So that should now be fixed. Let's just up our Z to see if that works. Yeah, and each time we're working nicely. There we go. Okay, so this just gives you an idea of what we can do with this. It's a pretty powerful combination that we can do as we get everything working together. So drivers with this array gives us a massive amount of possibilities, and it's just basically working out maths at this point. Anyway, I appreciate that's probably a bit more complex than the standard tutorial I do. It is more complicated because I wanted to involve something that used a variety of arrays, and I really wanted to show that this curve array is really valuable just because of that per curve function that just makes this so helpful. So there we go. Here's our bookshelf that we can randomize as we want. As I normally do, I'll put this file up on the Patreon, so if you're a Patreon, you get to have a look at this and play around with it as much as you want. And that is the best way you can support the channel. I don't get much money from doing this on YouTube. It's the Patreons that are very much giving me the time to be able to do this and create these videos. But if you're not in the situation where you can or want to join the Patreon, just hitting that like button also really helps and is very much appreciated. Hope to see you in the next video, and have a great day.